An unlikely survival story, or lack thereof, in the sequels. A history with a droid that gets forgotten. A father that doesn't recognize his own daughter. Keep watching for Star Wars plot holes that still have us scratching our heads. In A New Hope, Luke Skywalker discovers that R2-D2 has a holographic message of Princess Leia pleading to Obi-Wan Kenobi for help. So, Luke takes R2 out to find the hermit Old Ben Kenobi and tells him that R2-D2 has been looking for his former master.
Don't seem to remember ever owning a droid.
As anyone who's seen the original Star Wars trilogy knows, however, Obi-Wan has a nasty habit of withholding important information from Luke for reasons that aren't quite clear. This is another of those lies, as the prequel trilogy shows Obi-Wan going on adventures with R2-D2 for years. Maybe Obi-Wan just felt that wasn't the best time to reveal his history with the droid, but it still would have been nice to see him show some kind of affection to a war buddy he hadn't seen in forever. By the time Return of the Jedi rolls around, Luke has become quite seasoned with the Force, except during certain key moments when his mastery of the Force could have really helped. For example, during his battle with the Rancor at Jabba the Hutt's palace, he physically throws a rock at a control panel to kill the beast with a massive gate, when he could have just used his mind for that. Wasn't levitating rocks while doing a handstand part of his training with Yoda in Empire Strikes Back? There are plenty of other examples of Luke's convenient amnesia sprinkled throughout Return of the Jedi. You'd think that in a fight against a giant carnivorous alien, he would have instantly resorted to some Jedi guile instead of using his hands like a normal person. In The Force Awakens, after Finn has a change of heart about his commitment to the First Order, he frees Resistance pilot Poe Dameron from captivity and helps him commandeer a TIE fighter to escape. However, they're shot down by a First Order Star Destroyer and are forced to make a crash landing on Jakku. When Finn goes to inspect the wreckage, all he finds is Poe's jacket, and that's enough for him to come to the conclusion that Poe is dead. It's later revealed that Poe survived, with his explanation simply being that he was thrown from the TIE fighter when they landed on Jakku. Finn asks no more questions, but we have several, including thrown where? There was no sign of him anywhere nearby when Finn was looking. We're all in favor of keeping Oscar Isaac around for as long as possible, but surely they could have come up with a better explanation than that. At the end of Revenge of the Sith, Yoda and Obi-Wan conclude that the newly born Luke and Leia Skywalker must be separated and hidden where the Sith cannot find them. Leia is given to Bail Organa and his family on Alderaan, while Luke is sent to live with his step-uncle, Owen Lars, on Tatooine. Obi-Wan then heads out to the desert to live the rest of his life as a hermit and watch over Luke. But if you're trying to prevent the newly minted Vader from finding his son, why would you bring Luke to Vader's home planet and place him with Vader's own stepbrother? If Vader had gone home for any reason at all over those 2 decades, the entire galaxy would have been lost forever. Seems like a pretty big risk to take for no clear reason. In Return of the Jedi, Luke has a heart-to-heart with the Force spirit of Obi-Wan about his destiny. When Luke presses him on what Yoda meant about there being another, Obi-Wan tells Luke that he has a sister who remains safe in anonymity. Luke's Jedi instincts immediately tell him the truth.
Leia. Leia is my sister.
So how come Vader, who has far more training with the Force, never realized that Leia was his daughter during the time in A New Hope that he spent interrogating her? In the real world, it's probably because Lucas hadn't figured out Luke and Leia's relationship when he wrote A New Hope, but there doesn't seem to be an in-universe reason for the discrepancy. Return of the Jedi features the climactic battle between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader as Emperor Palpatine watches on. Luke defeats Vader but refuses to turn to the dark side, prompting the Emperor to electrify Luke in retaliation. That leads Vader to save his son's life by chucking Palpatine down the reactor shaft. Because cheating death is one of the primary perks of being on the dark side of the Force, Palpatine returns years later in The Rise of Skywalker and explains his resurrection as simply being the result of unnatural means. While Sidious's resurrection is explained in more detail in the Rise of Skywalker novelization, this probably should have been given more attention in the films. Fan service can be done in a way that works within the plot's rules, but this just came off as cheap and lazy. Return of the Jedi features a scene on Endor in which Luke asks Leia if she remembers her mother. Leia says that she remembers certain images and feelings.
She was very beautiful, kind, but sad.
Unfortunately, this doesn't make any sense. As revealed at the end of Revenge of the Sith, Luke and Leia's mother, Padme Amidala, died in childbirth. This could be potentially explained away by the Force-sensitive nature that runs in the Skywalker family, with Leia absorbing some vague impressions of Padme from those who knew her, or something. Still, this is still a pretty big oversight, especially considering George Lucas wrote the scripts for both films. Jar Jar Binks is a member of the Gungans, a race of amphibious creatures that mostly reside underwater on the planet Naboo. Ostracized from his own people for his massive ineptitude, Jar Jar ends up palling around with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace. Somehow, he manages to regain the trust of his people and is immediately promoted to the position of general when the Gungans join forces with Queen Amidala's army against the approaching droid forces. Eventually, in the following films, Jar Jar even rises to become a delegate to the Galactic Senate. But how could such a fool gain such political power and influence? Surely, no society would be so completely out of touch as to elect a candidate that incompetent for such an important job. It makes so little sense that some fans have theorized that Jar Jar may actually be a Sith Lord hiding in plain sight. In The Empire Strikes Back, Obi-Wan directs Luke Skywalker to go to the Dagobah system to develop his skills with the Force under Yoda, who Obi-Wan claims instructed him in the ways of the Jedi. However, in The Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon Jinn is shown to be the one who trains Obi-Wan. And it's even said in that very film that a practicing Jedi can only have one master. So what gives? Obi-Wan has been shown to be pretty squirrely when it comes to the truth, and this is seemingly another example of that. Maybe he lied about his relationship with Yoda to encourage Luke to train under him. But Luke already trusts Obi-Wan, so what's the reason for the deception? Seems like liars are just gonna lie. At the start of A New Hope, Darth Vader's forces invade a Rebel Alliance ship to retrieve the Death Star plans in their possession. Luckily, Princess Leia manages to hide the plans in R2-D2, who evades the Galactic Empire in an escape pod. Empire officers notice the escape pod carrying the droids, but don't detect any life forms and assume it was simply a malfunction. Later in the film, though, we see Luke, Obi-Wan, Han Solo, and the others infiltrate the Death Star by hiding in the Millennium Falcon's hull. The Imperial soldiers read the ship's log, which specifies that there are no life forms aboard.
Get me a scanning crew in here on the double. I want every part of this ship checked.
That's apparently enough to satisfy the soldiers, but it begs the question, if they can scan a tiny escape pod that's rocketing away into space, why wouldn't they use those scanners to check a full-size ship that they just allowed inside the Death Star? Han could have just left a note on the control console that read, "Nobody's home," and that apparently would have been enough to convince the Imperial soldiers not to use their proper scanning devices. The end of Revenge of the Sith sees Obi-Wan hand a baby Luke Skywalker to his new family on Tatooine, vowing to live in the desert nearby to watch over him. He kept his word for years afterward, living as Ben Kenobi, and only resurfacing when Luke approaches him with the message from Princess Leia pleading for Obi-Wan Kenobi's help.
You know him?
Well, of course I know him. He's me.
But why would Obi-Wan only change his first name? He's one of the most wanted figures in the galaxy. Surely changing his last name to pretty much anything else would make more sense. As far as fake identities go, Ben Kenobi is one of the least effective aliases we've ever heard. The Force Awakens introduced audiences to Rey as the sequel trilogy's primary protagonist. At the beginning of the film, she's an orphan scavenger with seemingly nothing special about her. But she soon displays an inherent talent for the Force. That includes using a Jedi mind trick to convince a stormtrooper to free her, and being able to handle her own in a lightsaber duel with Kylo Ren. Rey is not unlike Luke Skywalker in A New Hope in that she has some natural affinity for the Force and must go on a quest to fully realize her potential. However, A New Hope at least showed Luke training to use the Force under Obi-Wan Kenobi's tutelage, and his struggle to master the Force is a big part of his character arc. Rey, on the other hand, demonstrates some advanced Jedi skills without any training or practice. Why is that? How is that? The movies don't seem interested in explaining much of anything. In A New Hope, Obi-Wan tells Luke that Luke's father was killed by Darth Vader, a former apprentice of his that was corrupted by the dark side of the Force. The Empire Strikes Back features Luke training under Yoda in the ways of the Jedi so that he'll be prepared to take on Darth Vader. But he wasn't prepared, especially not for the parental bombshell that Vader dropped on him.
I am your father.
In Return of the Jedi, Luke returns to Dagobah, where both Yoda and Force Ghost Obi-Wan confirm that they always knew about Luke's relation to Darth Vader. We give Obi-Wan a lot of crap for withholding important information for no real reason, but it turns out that Yoda was an accomplice in his web of lies. But why? Obi-Wan told Luke that Vader killed his father from a certain point of view. Well, from reality's point of view, Obi-Wan straight up lied. When Leia tries to convince Han to stay with the Rebel Alliance on Hoth, Han arrogantly declares that she really wants him to stay because she has feelings for him. To prove him wrong, Leia marches toward Luke and gives him a big old smooch on the lips, much to Han's annoyance and Luke's satisfaction. What started off as a seemingly innocent love triangle gets a lot more uncomfortable in Return of the Jedi when Luke and Leia discover that they're siblings. The weird part? Leia claims she's not surprised.
Somehow, I've always known.
We can't blame Leia for wanting to put Han in his place for his smugness, but surely there were definitely less incestuous ways of doing so. Like many of the other plot holes on this list, it's most likely that Lucas hadn't fully planned out the overarching story before working on each installment. Not too much has been explained about how lightsabers work in the Star Wars universe, at least not in the films. One of the few consistencies, though, is that because of their extreme heat, they instantly cauterize any wound they inflict. There was no blood splatter in sight when Luke got his hand sliced off by Darth Vader in The Empire Strikes Back. There wasn't any gore when Darth Maul was bisected by Obi-Wan Kenobi in The Phantom Menace, or when Supreme Leader Snoke was wedged into multiple pieces in The Last Jedi. However, there was definitely blood when Ponda Baba picked a fight with Luke at Mos Eisley in A New Hope, only for Obi-Wan to step in and slash his arm off. Chalk it up to Lucas once again making stuff up as he goes, because there was no gush of blood in Empire Strikes Back when the Wampa loses an arm in the same way.